On March 27, 2026, the Myanmar military held its 81st Armed Forces Day in the capital of Naypyidaw. Columns of troops marched in immaculate lines beneath the towering statues of ancient kings, projecting an image of state control. Less than 100 miles away, the physical reality of the state breaks down. Supply convoys lie smoldering on dirt roads, ambushed and destroyed by local resistance fighters. 3 days after that parade, the man overseeing this fractured nation, Senior General Aung Hlaing, is set to trade his green fatigues for a civilian suit. He is preparing to be inaugurated as the new president of Myanmar. Under the military-drafted 2008 constitution, the president cannot simultaneously hold a military office. To take the presidency, Aung Hlaing must formally resign as commander-in-chief of the armed forces. This inauguration functions as a desperate institutional survival mechanism, a calculation to project legal continuity as the country splinters. To manufacture this presidential pivot, the Junta held a highly controlled, phased election in early 2026. The military-backed Union Solidarity and Development Party claimed 339 out of 586 legislative seats inside this heavily guarded parliament complex. The results were mathematically fixed. The National League for Democracy, along with dozens of prominent ethnic regional parties, were forcibly dissolved or barred from participating. The true targets for this exercise are international partners, specifically China and the ASEAN bloc. These allies require a legally recognizable civilian government on paper to justify continued diplomatic and economic engagement. The junta is leveraging the aesthetics of constitutional law to mask a severe tactical deficit. While they hold the parliament building, they have lost stable control over nearly 60% of Myanmar's territory. Historically, the Myanmar military has survived domestic outrage through a specific playbook. In the 1990s and 2000s, they managed crises by running sham elections, enduring international sanctions, and using overwhelming force to crush isolated rebellions one by one. As we look at the landscape of 2026, that proven strategy of attrition is failing. The failure stems from the rise of the People's Defense Forces, or PDFs. Originating in the central Bamar heartland, a region that traditionally supplied the military's own recruits, these civilian militias have evolved into embedded networks managing their own medical and logistical hubs in the jungle. The PDFs operate in direct coordination with seasoned ethnic armed organizations, including the Brotherhood Alliance, the KNU, and the KIA. This synchronization breaks the military's historical advantage, leaving the junta encircled by a coordinated nationwide resistance. The military is fighting a synchronized multi-front civil war that its command structure was never built to sustain. When we strip away the internationally recognized borders and map actual ground control, the scale of the state's fragmentation becomes visible. Zones of resistance territory are compressing the junta's reach. On the Western Front, the Arakan Army has secured 14 out of 17 townships in Rakhine State. Military forces are now besieged inside the state capital of Sitwe, completely cut off from resupply. Moving to the far north in Kachin State, the Kachin Independence Army has captured over 80 military bases, pushing the junta out of the highlands. Losing these northern border towns severs the junta's direct trade routes with China. The regime has lost access to billions in overland revenue. By forfeiting control of these critical crossing points, the flow of vital raw materials has completely halted. Stripped of its borderlands and rural supply chains, the military has defaulted to a defensive posture, the fortress strategy. They are concentrating their remaining armor, artillery, and loyalist troops to hold 3 urban islands, the capital of Naypyidaw, the commercial hub of Yangon, and the central city of Mandalay. The military's presence has contracted into heavily fortified urban islands, surrounded by a hostile, liberated periphery. Confined to urban fortresses, the military compensates for its lack of ground mobility by leaning on its monopoly over the sky, deploying Russian-made jets. The volume of this air campaign is extensive. In 2025 alone, the military executed 2,165 distinct airstrikes across the country. These strikes target civilian infrastructure to punish populations in rebel-held zones. Recent bombardments have leveled the Mrauk-U General Hospital and decimated a crowded trading market. Internal intelligence reveals a darker tactical shift, the implementation of a no-surrender doctrine. In a recent engagement, the regime dispatched aircraft to bomb a facility holding 116 of its own captured soldiers who had surrendered, killing the prisoners of war. The regime is actively executing its own troops to deny resistance forces a propaganda victory and terrify remaining battalions. The 3.6 million internally displaced people and soaring risks of famine are the deliberate results of a cornered faction utilizing collective punishment. When we examine the upcoming March 30th presidential inauguration against the backdrop of this military collapse, the political theater in Naypyidaw takes on a very specific function. This diagram illustrates the shadow architecture the military is constructing. By creating a nominally civilian government on the surface, they are bypassing the limitations of their own 2008 constitution. Senior General Min Aung Hlaing elevates himself to the top node as the civilian president, stepping out of uniform to satisfy diplomatic requirements. Immediately below him, his longtime subordinate, Deputy So Win, is positioned to take over the role of Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces. This specific personnel arrangement preserves the historical chain of loyalty between the two generals, rendering the civilian oversight of the military obsolete. The military has engineered a legal loophole to transfer executive authority back to itself, shielded by a tailor-made suit. 5 years after the initial coup, the situation is defined by the existence of two distinct Myanmars. There is the isolated, heavily armed elite holding parades inside the fortified borders of Naypyidaw, and then there is the fractured, burning country fighting a multi-front war everywhere else. By forfeiting its borders, losing its economic corridors, and turning its air force against its own population, the Myanmar military has compromised its status as a functioning national state actor. The 2026 presidential shift represents the final barricade of the regime reduced to a heavily armed faction in a fragmented landscape.